This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Welcome to the 2021 edition of Game Night, day one of the new year. Hope you had a great holiday. Hope you're having a good day, despite the fact that the Eagles had one of the most ugly performances I've ever seen in the National Football League on primetime Sunday Night Football. But we get to look forward to what is next for the Eagles. Also, what is next in Philadelphia sports, because the Sixers are back in action tonight. So we got a busy 1 hour show. Andrew DeCecco to talk more about the Eagles coming up at 6:15. At 6:40, we'll talk with Jason Blevins. He's covering the Sixers tonight for 97.3 ESPN.com over at the Arena. So we'll get in touch with him as well on the show. 609-403-0973 on the text board, as Mike Gill mentioned earlier, because, listen, last night there were a lot of things that happened yesterday. A lot of things that happened, and I got to start off with this. And I wasn't really planning on starting off with this, but when Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman spoke earlier today, I realized that these guys, they really don't understand the perception of this organization right now. You go out there and you complain about, well, you know, we haven't had all of our meetings yet, when you're asked about the coaching staff. When you're asked about the reports on Carson Wentz, you don't deny them, you just kind of bypass it. He kind of just said, oh, well, you know, that's not kind of true, not really true. When asked about if you're going to trade him, you didn't definitively say no. There was nothing at all that this organization has done in the last 24 hours to dispel any of the chaos. Nothing. This organization continues to have a huge perception issue. They don't care what you think. They don't care what I think. They don't care what their own mother thinks. Because apparently, this organization thinks they can do no wrong. Or at least that's the attitude they give off when they're asked these questions by the media. And the person I feel bad for the most today is Jalen Hurts. This young man did not ask for another drama football life. He went through this already at Alabama. That's why he transferred to Oklahoma. Oh, by the way, Chris Collinsworth, he played at Oklahoma too. I know you forgot about that last night during the broadcast. I mean, come on, Collinsworth. People talk about how Doug Peterson quit. I think Collinsworth quit on the season last night. Did you hear me call Montez Sweat Josh Sweat? He couldn't remember what college Jalen Hurts went to. He fumbled and stumbled over Jim Schwartz compliments. You could tell he didn't want to even give him any compliment. I mean, come on. I mean, Collinsworth was just not, I don't even want to be there last night. I really don't. But I digress. You look at this Eagles team, you can tell that there's something going on with this organization. And I don't know if it's going to be a 30 for 30 documentary on ESPN 10 years from now, or if we'll ever know in the meantime. But there's something that's not adding up. There's some reason why they kept trotting Carson Wentz out there. There was some reason why they kept insisting that things are okay. There's some reason why this organization drafted Jalen Hurts, against most analysts' recommendations. There had to be some reason why Jim Schwartz suddenly says, I'm going to take a year off from football. I might even retire from football altogether. There's some reason why Carson Wentz refused to speak to the media today. He declined. He said, no, thank you. Decline, no, thank you. You're one of the biggest stories in all the NFL right now. And you decide to give the whistle and the wave, as Mike Gill would say, to the media? The media, which is really the only legitimate conduit you have to the fans, because apparently you don't use your Twitter account to talk to anybody about anything except for your charitable efforts. You got Zach Ertz up there crying in front of the media, knowing it might be probably his last time speaking to the media as a Philadelphia Eagle. Carson Wentz, disinterested. He's out. He's gone. This organization has so much weird stuff going on. How about the fact that Will Parks was released And then a couple weeks later, Rodney McLeod tears his knee up and is done for the year. You don't think they could have used Will Parks for the last few weeks when it's been Grayson Arnold back there in the secondary with Marcus Epps, who ran into the most lucky interception I've ever seen in my life? This organization has a perception problem, and they're indirectly answering their own questions. This is what Sal Paolantonio said earlier on the Sports Bash about the fact of what it means when Wentz says, I don't feel like talking to the media.
He had an opportunity to address the fans today and say, listen, I don't know where these reporters are getting this stuff from. I want to be in an Eagles uniform in 2021. I want to lead this franchise to a Super Bowl. He didn't do that. Mm-hmm. That was not the right thing to do for him and his organization. Because even if you don't believe it, you got to say it.
Sal's 100% right. It doesn't matter if Howie Roseman or Doug Peterson or Carson Wentz feels a certain way. There's certain things you just got to say to the general public as a public figure to let people know that, frankly, you're serious about the question that's being asked of you. And it feels like so many times they just don't take the media seriously. And I think that, maybe there's I don't know if it's entitlement, I don't know if it's just ego, but there's some reason why certain people, when they're asked questions by reporters and members of the media, that they have this attitude of, I don't have to answer that question. I don't like your question. But then the way you answer it tells us volumes about you and the situation. 609-403-0973 on the text board. I'll get your text in just a moment. Got a bunch of them to get to. I will get to you guys. Just give me 1 sec. But I got to finish up with this. So as we move forward with the Eagles, whether the Eagles keep Wentz or trade him, whether the Eagles start Jalen Hurts next year or Carson Wentz or another person, whether they draft Patrick Surtain, the cornerback from Alabama, or the linebacker from Penn State, Micah Parsons, or Jamar Chase, the wide receiver set out for the year who played at LSU last year. Whoever they draft, just know one thing. You might not have a straight answer from this organization about anything for a long time. And case in point, we still don't know who actually makes the decisions around the organization. People want to blame Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson for a lot of things. But yet I have no certainty in telling you right here on January 4th, 2021, that Doug Peterson or Howie Roseman were the reason why they drafted Jalen Reagor or J. Arcega-Whiteside. There's too much smoke out there for me to say there is not a fire. 609-403-0973 is text board. Andrew DeCecco, 973ESPN.com, Eagles writer, as well as contributor for InsideTheBirds.com. Will join us coming up at 6:15. Jason Blevins will join us coming up at 6:40 to preview the Sixers versus Hornets game. Tonight, you hear all the action at 7 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. At least one team in Philadelphia knows how to win. At least it's the Sixers. How ironic is that? Just a few years ago, they couldn't win a game, and now they're the best team right down in the city. That's at least till the Flyers get back on the ice. 609-403-0973. Dan from EHC says, eye test. Arm talent is not enough from Hurts. Accuracy doesn't look good. Just watch. Somehow the Eagles have a horrendous schedule again next year. Well, first of all, the schedule right now is actually on the website at 973ESPN.com, Dan EHC. So you can go to the website right now and check out who the Eagles' opponents will be for next year at 973ESPN.com and 973 ESPN mobile app. But you mentioned the arm talent. I don't think you and I are watching the same game, Dan, from EHC, because if you're saying the eye test with Hurts, that his arm isn't good enough, the action doesn't look good, then you're forgetting about the 3 drops that the Eagles receivers had yesterday. You're forgetting about all the times he threw the ball away instead of taking a sack or committing a turnover. You're overlooking the fact that there have been a couple of those interceptions where the receiver obviously ran the wrong route. So, are we just going off of numbers when it comes to accuracy, or are we going off the eye test, as you call it? Because the eye test tells me that he has an NFL arm. And the eye test tells me that there are times that he makes the right throw, but the receiver doesn't do their job. Those are two different things. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Tito in EHG chimes in and says, I think we should fix our offensive line because if Hurts was not a mobile quarterback, he too would be getting sacked. Wentz is good, but there is no offensive line. Well, Tito, the offensive line is the way it is because of the fact that the injuries. You had your 14th offensive line combination last night. The only person who's played every game this year is Jason Kelce. Gil and Broads talking about it earlier on the Bash. You had Matt Pryor playing 4 different positions this year at different points in time. Brett Toth, a guy who was on a practice squad with another organization, he got brought in here for depth purposes. He had to start last night. You have way too many dudes shuffling in on that offensive line. So does the offensive line need to be fixed or does the offensive line need to be healthy? I say they need to be healthy. Those are two different things. If they're healthy, you have an offensive line. 609-403-0973. One more text came in and says, I'm glad Nate Sudfeld came in last night. I put all my money on Washington football team to cover. Well, that's strange because they actually didn't cover. It was a 6.5 line. The Eagles lost by 6. So you might want to go check your bet slip again. That was actually one of my picks on Saturday's show, on the Sports Match Saturday. I said the Eagles would cover the 6.5. They lost by 6. Buddy, go check your bet slip. Come on, man. Now, if you bet the line down, that'd be a different story, but you gotta be a little more specific. You just said a blank text. It just said, boom, that. I mean, good for you. You made some money, but give us a little more information about betting. We can text a little bit later in the show, 609-403-0973. You're on the conversation. You're on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco covers the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com and InsideTheBirds.com. Joins us next on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Game Night being brought to you, my friends, over at weightliftinghq.com. It's 2021. That means you want to get in on your health and fitness goals. Listen, it was a good holiday for a lot of people. Maybe not for the Eagles, but for a lot of people. But maybe too much of a good time. Well, whatever your health and fitness goals are, weightliftinghq.com is here to help you get back in shape. Or maybe you want to complement your workout routine because you're already at the gym, but you only get there a few days a week because you're working from home. Well, weightliftinghq.com is here to help with bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, resistance bands, cardio and fitness machines, and more. Whatever you need, you can get it at weightliftinghq.com, and they will deliver it to your house because they're located right here in South Jersey. Use my code RADIO10 for 10% off at checkout. That's RADIO10 at checkout for weightliftinghq.com. Andrew DiCecco covers the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com and InsideTheBirds.com. Joins us right now on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Talk more about the Eagles here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, how you doing today?
Hey, Josh. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So, listen, I think we all saw a bad football game last night, so we all need to rehash that specifically. But I got to ask you, it feels like after the game, the way Peterson talked, the way Hurts talked, the way Howie and Doug talked to the media today, there's a perception issue with this team. And for Carson Wentz to just, decline to talk to the media on the last day of the season while Zach Ertz is up there crying, the whole thing just screams dysfunction and we don't care what you think about us.
Yeah, I mean, Black Monday, that's what they call it. I mean, there's been so much that's happened in less than 24 hours after that game, and it's kind of setting the scene for what's expected to be a tumultuous offseason.
Now, speaking of that tumultuous offseason, obviously Howie and Doug did a very poor job at dismissing the Carson Wentz reports that have come out recently. Carson Wentz, not speaking to the media, obviously sounds like that Wentz doesn't want to talk to the media, which almost sounds like he's almost confirming the report. How do you feel about how the organization is handling those reports?
I mean, they were pressed and poked and prodded about that between last night and today, and they really answered it kind of how I would expect them to answer it. They're not really going to offer much. They're going to say the right things and continue to, convey the message that they want to make things work with Carson, and that they believe that they're the ones that can kind of incite change and get the offense back on track and so on and so forth. I mean, you could see by the body language that they weren't comfortable answering that. And I think that when you saw Carson decide that he didn't want to talk to reporters today, when have you ever seen Carson opt to not do that? I mean, especially on the heels of the news that just came out, here's an opportunity to kind of, shoot down that rumor or whatever it was. And, he opted not to do that. So, I mean, I think that you're kind of we're left to our own assumptions here. And then, it's hard to believe that that story is starting to make more and more sense now.
So do you believe that Carson Wentz will not be in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform at the start of next season?
Yeah, I kind of struggle to see how that would be possible given everything that's kind of transpired over the last month or so since being benched in the third quarter against the Green Bay Packers. It's sometimes, like, as soon as they made that move, it's you think, okay, maybe if they go back to Carson next week, this can be salvaged. But now there's just too much damage for it to be kind of undone and salvaged at this point. And I think that when you see all these different stories happening and you see the players, it was Jason Kelce to Zach Ertz and Carson sitting together after the game, you kind of get the sense that they were all prepared for this to be their last game in Midnight Green. And I mean, based on everything that we've kind of seen and everything that's sort of transpired with the whole quarterback situation and Doug Peterson, he's expected to come back, and Howie Roseman, by all accounts, is expected to come back. Under that same dynamic, it's kind of hard to see Carson Wentz return given the whole infrastructure of things.
Andrew DeCecco joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at @DeCecco NFL. Also, you can catch his work at 97.3 ESPN.com and also InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew, obviously, one of the things this team also has to figure out is who the starting quarterback is, because if Carson Wentz is not the starter next year, the assumption right now is Jalen Hurts. What are your takeaways from Jalen Hurts after what is basically 3.5 games?
One thing that I was impressed with Jalen Hurts was his poise, his leadership, and his pocket presence. Now, the more we've seen from Jalen, his pocket presence hasn't been what it was against the Saints when he took 0 sacks. He's fleet-footed. Obviously, we know that. He's able to escape pressure with his legs, but sometimes it almost seems like he's too ready to leave the pocket with his feet and instead of sitting back there. Other times he holds on to the football a bit too long given the offensive line that's in front of him. I do like that he throws the football away, but we're not seeing him put together these complete games. What you're seeing is these fast starts on offense, and then teams are adjusting, and they're coming back out and instituting those adjustments in the second half. And Jalen and the Eagles aren't able to adjust, and you're seeing a lot of stagnant offense. They're not able to move the football, and they're leaving a lot of points on the field. And, I think some of that has to do with Jalen being a rookie quarterback. But he's shown signs of being somebody that can lead a team. Now, I don't know. 4 games is hardly a large enough sample size to feel confident moving forward with any player, let alone the starting quarterback. But I think right now, given what the Eagles are up against, it almost seems like this has to be their option moving forward.
Now, if he is the option moving forward, what do you expect the Eagles can do this offseason, considering they just restructured Alshon Jeffrey and Malik Jackson's contracts? We know that they're going to have to do some serious financial gymnastics to even move Carson Wentz. We know that there's a lot of guys who are veterans who may not be back next year because either contracts are expiring or because they might be salary cap casualties. How different could this team look around Jalen Hurts compared to the one we saw this season?
Yeah, it's going to look vastly different, and it really has to, whether it's their choice or not. I mean, they simply don't have they're cash strapped right now, and they're going to have to do a lot of movement and maneuvering. And I think the priority has to be the offensive line, because I don't care who's under center, you're only going to be as good as the protection up front. And the same thing with the weapons. It doesn't matter how good your weapons are if you're constantly under siege. So I think with that 6th overall pick that they have right now, they need to consider offensive tackle there. Penei Sewell from Oregon, obviously, if he falls down to 6, will be an enticing option and something that the offense totally needs right now. I think that it's going to be a lot younger. You're going to see guys like Quez Watkins, John Hightower, obviously Jalen Reagor, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders. These are all going to be pieces around Jalen. But like I said, without an offensive line, it doesn't matter who you have at the skill position, because you really need to protect Jalen, because at that rate, at the rate he was getting hit in just those 4 games, he won't make it through a 16-game season.
To play devil's advocate, though, I'll just ask you this. How much did what we saw from those few games of Hurts being under siege, as you mentioned, was because Brandon Brooks was injured, Lane Johnson was injured, Mailata missed the last game of the year. There were so many injuries on the line, and Kelsey didn't play well, let's be realistic, for the last couple of weeks. One could argue that if maybe the Eagles' offensive line is healthy next year, maybe they don't have to make as many additions. How do you buy into that at all?
I guess you could, but it's kind of hard to when you look at the injuries sustained by Brandon Brooks. Can you count on him moving forward? Lane Johnson, I mean, I think that the way he described his ankle was his ankle pretty much, just completely gave out. It didn't sound like a simple surgery. It sounds like something that's going to take some time. So you have 2 key pieces right there that have so much uncertainty surrounding them going into the offseason. Two pivotal pieces. Jason Kelsey may not be back next year. Jordan Mailata, we saw some good things from him, but he's hardly a certainty given the sample size that we have from him. And Isaac Seumalo hasn't really performed well enough for me to feel comfortable that he's going to be a stalwart at left guard, or even if they move him to center, if they have to do that. There's just so many question marks there that I think that they need to get younger there. And they have to figure out a way to do that fast, because they don't have a lot of wiggle room there.
Now, you mentioned what they can and can't do. I also have to wonder, speaking of the lines, on the defensive line, I know they just restructured Malik Jackson's deal, but I don't know if that guarantees he's going to be here for much longer, because I know there's certain clauses in there that allow them to get out of it before June 1st. Also, we don't know if is Vinny Curry coming back? Is Derek Barnett coming back? I mean, how different can the defensive line look as well? And is the defensive line something they maybe need to look at as well in the draft?
Yeah, the problem that the Eagles have right now, Josh, is that they have so many holes everywhere. And like you said, yes, they restructured. They did some restructuring with Malik Jackson, but that hardly, ensures that he's going to be back next season. In fact, it would probably be beneficial to the Eagles to not bring him back next season and try to get younger there. You already have enough money tied up to Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. They just re-signed T.Y. McGill today to a 1-year deal. There's some defensive tackles in the draft that I think you have to consider going after. There's just, and as far as Vinny Curry goes, I think that third end role deservedly should go to Josh Sweat, who's proven that he can deserves a more prominent role. He had a career high 6 sacks he just completed his 3rd season. They just need to get younger there. They have Brandon Graham, who's kind of been that rock, one of the more consistent players the Eagles have. He's not going anywhere. Derek Barnett, I could take or leave. He hasn't given you the production that you would expect from a 1st-round pick. But I think Josh Sweat, there's something there in him. Do I think he can be a starter given his injury history? No, I don't. But I think that he can take over that Vinny Curry role, and they can kind of fill in with either a young free agent that comes, very cost effective, or in the mid rounds for a pass rusher there. They have to get younger.
Andrew Checo joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, being brought to you by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at @ADeCheco NFL. Check out his content over at 973ESPN.com and InsideTheBirds.com here on 973 ESPN. The day after the Eagles season finally ends, and we know a draft pick they're going to have. It would be number 6 overall. You mentioned Penei Sewell earlier. If he drops to the Eagles earlier, I'm very hyper-focused on if there's one player there to me that they have to get. And I think you and I talked about this before. If Patrick Surtain II is there, they have to get him, in my opinion, because I know there's issues on the offensive side of the ball. But this team got exposed so many times by receivers this year. And to me, if they had a competent, good cornerback across from Darius Slay, they could bump Avonte Maddox back into the slot. They don't need Jalen Mills to keep jumping positions all over the place. They might have a little more stability defensively, which means the defense might actually be better next year.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. Nothing makes me more, kind of confused when I see all these different all these different, wish lists that have Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith at the top of the list. I mean, they just spent over the past 2 seasons a second-round pick on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and a first-round pick on Jalen Reagor. There's a lot of other holes there that you can get a Chris Olave or a Kadarius Toney or something later in the second or third round even. So I think that when you look at the defense, they don't have any young building blocks. Darius Slay's 29 years old. Avonte Maddox is what he is. He's a nickel corner. I think he can be a high-level nickel corner. But you need to get a young defensive back that you can sort of build a defense around. And I think Patrick Surtain fits that mold. They really need a player that can match up with all different types of receivers, that can be a 10-year starter, and you don't have to keep doing all this switching around. I mean, at one point they had, Kevon Seymour and Jameson Houston and Cravon LeBlanc and all these different guys shuffling in and out of the secondary. And, those are fringe NFL players. They need to, quit messing around and get one of these blue chip guys and that they can really build around. So I agree with you there.
Do you buy into the idea, or do you dislike the idea that's been suggested by some that the Eagles need to take that 6th overall pick and trade down to get more picks? That would be the best option.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Seth Joyner say that, and I could definitely get on board with that. It depends, because I mean, like, if they want to go corner, but they could trade down possibly in the first round and get a quality second corner on my board, which would be J.C. Horn from South Carolina, and then maybe get a wide receiver in that late round, maybe a Chris Olave from Ohio State or something like that. They just have so many holes right now that you could certainly justify that. But one thing's for certain: if they stay at 6, they cannot miss on that pick, because that can be a franchise-altering selection. And given the Eagles' draft history, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not too confident that they're going to be able to nail this pick.
Now, speaking of that draft history, one of the things that I still don't have a lot of confidence in is exactly who's making the decisions, because there's been reports that, Jeffrey Lurie told them he wanted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. There's reports that the coaching staff wanted Jalen Reagor, but the scouts wanted Justin Jefferson. There's reports that, Joe Douglas, some of the picks the Eagles made were considered Joe Douglas picks, and they weren't Howie Roseman picks. There's controversy about who was making the picks during the Chip Kelly era as well. To me, part of the problem with the Eagles is not just I don't trust them to make the right pick. I don't know who is making the decisions, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us do, because we're not in that war room. All we hear is speculation. One thing that is for certain for me is they need to get Doug Peterson more involved as far as having some say in the personnel that he has. I mean, if you read between the lines in some of his late season press conferences, he kind of alluded to some of those things, that he would like to have a little bit more of a say in who they're bringing in here. And I think that if you're going to make him your head coach, and you at least want to, you should at least have some sort of a say in who he's going to have to coach. And I think John Dorsey being in the fold, he should have a bigger voice. And I think they should kind of have Howie Roseman focus more on the contract side of things and get more guys involved that are more on the personnel side than the scouting side, that do more of the coaching, the hands-on stuff. I think that they should have more of a voice in the war room.
Now, you mentioned about having more of a voice in the war room. What do you think would be the difference then if Doug Peterson had more of a voice? Like, what is there something specifically you think would be different in terms of maybe some of these situations and these outcomes?
You know, I think that he would probably prioritize positions differently. And I think that, you know, it's hard to say because, you know, maybe Doug Peterson liked Justin Jefferson more than Jalen Reagor. We just won't know that. But I do think that he doesn't have much of a say, and he kind of just has to coach the guys that they give him. And, you know, you could kind of sense, I want to say, frustration. You heard the press conferences, and you probably read the transcripts. I mean, there's some things in there that you kind of feel like that might be one of the conversations that he has with Jeffrey Lurie tomorrow. That's probably going to be brought up. You know, if you guys are giving me these guys to work with, I want to at least be able to have some sort of involvement in the selection process, and I think rightfully so. I mean, he can only work with what he has, and I think that if he's going to go down, at least have him go down with, you know, having a say in the personnel that he has.
He's Andrew DeCecco. Give him a follow on Twitter at @DeCeccoNFL. Check out his work over at 97.3ESPN.com and InsideTheBirds.com. And as all guests, he appeared on Game Night on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Andrew will be back on tomorrow for football at 4 with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody. Andrew, thanks again for jumping on tonight, and we'll catch you tomorrow.
My pleasure, Josh. Take care.
Josh Hennick here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, our Eagles conversation being brought to you by weightliftinghq.com. Use code radio10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Squat and bench, kettlebells, dumbbells, cardio and fitness machines, resistance bands, whatever you need to help you reach your health and fitness goals, whether you're someone who goes to the gym, wants to get a little extra workout from home, or you're not ready to go back to the gym because maybe you're working out from home and you got to get your workout in. You could do it with weightliftinghq.com. Use code radio10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order, because weightliftinghq.com is not just going to deliver your equipment. They are right here in South Jersey, so they're going to bring it right to your home and help you set up the equipment. So you got to sit there and try to figure out which nut and which bolt goes where. No. They help you every step of the way for your purchase at weightliftinghq.com. We'll get back to your text in the next segment, 609-403-0973. Plus, we'll preview Sixers versus Hornets tonight with Jason Blevins right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Welcome back to the Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Here on 97.3 ESPN, Sixers basketball versus the Hornets. Here all the action coming on next here on 97.3 ESPN. Joining us right now for the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. He's covering the game for 97.3 ESPN.com. He is Jason Blevins, and he joins us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline to preview more of the game as the Sixers have another game against the Hornets. Jason, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's second Charlotte game in 3 nights, so it feels like early season. It's like a tradition like no other that Charlotte would be in Philadelphia a bunch in early NBA season.
How do you feel right now about the way this schedule lays out? Because there's a lot of these, odd back-to-backs being thrown in there. The way the travel schedule is, it definitely has a different vibe, does it not?
It does, but to be honest, when you're on the beat, it's like you're almost going one practice to the next. So it's like practice, game, maybe an off day, practice, shoot around. So quite frankly, I don't look too far ahead into the schedule.
Now, considering the game tonight, we've seen the Sixers get off to a pretty good start this year. Maybe not the prettiest way they've got it done, but what are your impressions overall about how they've started? Because aside from the Cavs game, they found ways to win all these games, but it hasn't been the most aesthetically pleasing at times.
Yeah, I think they're early in the installation process of their offense, and I think what they're doing is trying to, squeeze the juice out of certain sets, run them a bunch of times to get used to running them. And I think there's an element of live game practice that's happening. I don't think you've seen the majority of the offense that they'll ultimately want to run. But I think what you're seeing is them feeling their way out with these sets. getting more comfortable about where the open lanes are for passing and driving. So I think, the last couple of games you saw a different level of comfort, but especially between Danny Green and Seth Curry, just simply on like where they needed to be to catch shots, to catch passes and get shots up. Those are all works in progress, but I think one thing you're seeing is that the league really doesn't have an answer right now for Joel Embiid, and he's creating so many problems for teams that the other players around him are starting to figure out what to do with that option B and C, and Doc has talked about that.
You mentioned the league doesn't know what to do with Embiid. How do you think the Sixers can maybe amplify that advantage? Because it feels like at times, at least watching the game each night, it feels like, all right, Embiid's involved, but sometimes maybe he's not as involved. Is that the players trying to figure out how to play with each other? Or is that something that maybe Doc can maybe amplify with his coaching staff?
Well, I think what you're starting to see recently is the opposing teams are doubling him off ball. So even before he gets an entry pass, they are doubling him, which is going to limit his touches. So that's what they're trying to do. But it's obviously creating a 4-on-3 situation elsewhere. So you're going to see times where the other team will just sell out to deny him the ball. You saw that early and late with Charlotte. His touches went down in the second half. The Sixers turned the ball over quite a bit, trying to figure out what to do with that. But it's like a pick your poison type of situation that the Sixers are forcing teams into, and that's a good thing for this early in the year.
Jason Blevins joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at JBlevins NBA for all of your Sixers and NBA coverage at the game tonight, which you hear the action coming up here on 97.3 ESPN at 7 p.m. Jason, you mentioned the turnovers. That's kind of been my frustration with Simmons so far this year. It feels like the turnovers are coming at a very high pace. Is that also because they're adjusting to how to play together, or is maybe Simmons pressing a little bit?
I actually asked him about this after the game Saturday night. So I think his response, I think my question was, you took care of the ball. You got any shot you wanted in the first half. Second half, you turned the ball over a ton. Was that the pressure of Charlotte? And Charlotte really tried to amplify the pace and put full court pressure on? Or was it them just playing too loose? He said that they were playing too loose. Now, part of that's not giving the opponent any credit, but that I think they really just were feeling themselves so much in that first half that they just started overpassing. And Charlotte was gambling a lot in passing lanes. They were swiping at everything. So they created a little bit of havoc. It's something we should watch for, because if I was Charlotte, I would try to start the game that way tonight. And if the Sixers turn the ball over 10 times in the first half, or 15 like they did in the second half Saturday, then I think you have to say there's a concern. But their ability to put Seth Curry, Shake Milton, Ben Simmons all on the floor at the same time is a dimension that they just didn't quite have last year, where they were pretty limited in their ball handlers. So I'm not super concerned about the turnovers early in the year.
One of the big questions I run into a lot when I run into people, either on social media or if I'm talking to somebody in person, obviously socially distanced in today's world, is Tobias Harris. I run into a lot of people who seem to have a problem with Tobias. They don't think he fits the team. They think he's overpaid. They don't know how well. And then he played well the other night. So what is your perspective on Tobias? Because I think that if Tobias Harris plays the way he's capable of, he's a great number 3 option for the team. But there's still a lot of people in the fan base who seem to be not sold on him.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think he looked really out of sorts last year for the most part of the year, like some other players did. Another guy, Mike Scott, got sort of the same treatment. what Doc Rivers is able to do, and I think we talked about it last time I was on, is create just a level of comfort in the players, simplify what they're being asked to do. But also it's the effect of having capable gravity-inducing players around them that is really opening things up for him. He is making faster decisions, which is something Doc's talked about. But if you think about the gravity down low that Joel Embiid has, and we just talked about that, and then a Seth Curry and the fact that, he has to be guarded 25 feet away from the basket, that creates just a lot more room for a deliberate type of ball handler like Tobias Harris to be able to do things without turning the ball over or sort of getting locked up. So he's just, I think, getting the benefit of the scheme, and he's looking much more like the player he was for the Clippers under Doc Rivers than he was for Philadelphia under Brett Brown.
Jason Blevins joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, you can follow Jason on Twitter at JBlevinsNBA for all your Sixers and NBA coverage. Sixers beat reporter for 97.3 ESPN and covers Sixers for the Painted Lines. Jason, when you think about this team with Tobias Harris, though, moving forward, there's a lot of speculation that he may be thrown into a trade. There's speculation that the Sixers, I've seen the Zach LaVine rumors all starting now. Everybody and their cousin seems to want James Harden, even though he's basically acting like a child down there in Houston. What is your perspective on if there are changes to this team when the trade deadline comes around, what those might actually be in reality?
Yeah, so if you look at what their movable pieces are, they really come down to make any big move, you need a matching salary. So Danny Green is a salary of $15 million, but he doesn't carry a net positive asset because of his age. Tobias Harris, it's really a mixed bag as far as where he's valued around the league. But his salary is such that it would match for a really large deal. So if you wanted to move for a James Harden, you'd have to use Tobias Harris salary unless you wanted to move Ben Simmons. And with a Zach LaVine, actually, he makes much less than Tobias. But you'd have to think that Chicago would want a younger player than Danny Green. So you'd have to think about a package that would match up with like a Zach LaVine and Otto Porter for something with Tobias Harris picks and one of the young players on the Sixers. And, Chicago would probably want a Shake Milton and a Matisse Thybulle included in something like that. So it becomes a pretty significant trade that you'd be looking at. The Sixers are playing so well right now. I'm not sure that they have any real reason to overpay right now. We'll see how that is near the trade deadline. But the reason that I think he's included so much is that it's just viewed around the league as an overpay for a guy that, isn't, to your point, a first or second option on a championship team.
You mentioned the overpay real quick. Couldn't I argue, though, that a lot of guys in the NBA are overpaid? So what makes Tobias Harris the exception then in people's minds?
I really don't know. I think it's just sort of the Philadelphia mentality. Everything is amazing or terrible, and that changes hour by hour. So I think nuance is probably part of it. You look at the contracts that were given out in the 2016 free agency period, right before, as the salary cap went up, right before it flattened out. Some people got crazy money. Like Kent Bazemore got crazy money. I'm forgetting. There was like 4 or 5 guys that just got offered.
Mozgov.
What's that?
Mozgov was
Mozgov got crazy money. Yeah, that was a year where just like everybody got paid. Tobias Harris got overpaid mainly because the team sunk some assets into acquiring him. And they had the money to spend. They were over the salary cap. They wouldn't have been able to spend $38 million or whatever he gets paid, $30 million on another free agent the year after. So it's sort of funny money at that point. They're a capped team. So it was, it's only a problem if it makes him untradeable. I don't personally think he's untradeable. I think he still has value in the league. I don't think he carries James Harden value straight up, obviously. But, I think there are a lot of teams that are trying to make that push between being young and disorganized to being, but talented, to being good and competitive. And I think Chicago is one of those types of teams. You see Phoenix, what they're doing right now by having a real veteran come in and sort of turn that franchise from young and talented to actual, production on the floor. A lot of teams right now that could convince themselves that Tobias Harris is the kind of guy, the stabilizing veteran who's still only 28, 29, that could help them turn the corner.
He's Jason Blevins. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at JBlevinsNBA at the Sixers-Hornets game tonight, covering all the action. Again, cover Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.com and the Painted Lines. Jason, appreciate you jumping on game night. Enjoy the game tonight.
Thanks, Josh. Talk soon.
Josh Hennick here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Before we get out here, I want to remind you, my friends, over at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can download it right now. The app is so easy to use to your Android or your app, or you can jump on sportsbook.fanduel.com because the NFL is reaching the postseason, the NBA tipping off tonight, and there's no better reason for you to get involved with FanDuel, aside from the fact that it's number one sportsbook in America, but also because you can do great things like right now. When you use promo code HENNIG, HENNIG, you can get your first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Right. Place a bet on any game, and FanDuel will refund you up to $1,000 if you don't win your first bet. That's with FanDuel Sportsbook. Use promo code HENNIG, HENNIG, at sign up. You get your first bet up to $1,000 risk-free. Only with FanDuel Sportsbook. I would recommend throwing some money on Colin Sexton, the over on the points tonight, over 24, because Darius Garland out for the Cavs tonight. He will not play. Also, with Kevin Garnett out for the next week and a half, any over on Karis LeVert, take that for the next 4 games. Couple recommendations for you on FanDuel Sportsbook. Thanks again for Andrew DeCecco joining us. Talk Eagles. Jason Blevins talking Sixers. Sixers-Hornets next here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig. I'll be back tomorrow night for Game Night at 6 o'clock following the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody.